Yeah, and part of it was the intrigue of how do you feel when your mother is not just judgmental and not as giving as you want, but world renowned. I mean,
Right, right,
that's a biggie also. That gave us a
Right.
lot of stuff to play with. That people knew her and knew of her and knew her expertise and were comforted by her in a way that her daughter wasn't.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview, where our guests today are Sue Patterson and Susan DiLallo, and we're going to be talking about their book that they wrote together called Things I Wish I Told My Mother, which they co-wrote. And it's a Book Reporter Bets on selection. And readers know that those are the books that I really say, just take this and read it. You're going to love it. We shared early copies of this book with a large group of our readers. And I'm going to share some of the questions that they have during this interview. But the bottom line is they loved it. Here's what one had to say. I couldn't put it down from the very page to the very end. The story evokes emotions that one does not expect. Story is rife with conflict, contrast, revealing truths, and raw emotions. A true study of a mother-daughter relationship, a very, very good read. And another said, beautifully told and poignant, this story will touch readers' hearts. As with any mother-daughter duo, there are fights and differences of opinion, but these two can't seem to agree on anything until they take that memorable trip to Europe. The trip is more than it seems. It's a chance for Laurie to see her mom in a different light, not as Dr. Liz, but as mom. But there's so much more to the story, and since I don't want to give any away spoilers, the reader must grab a copy and dive right in. So I agree completely. So welcome to both of you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Yeah. It's good to see you too, Susan.
That's exactly, you two are in the same place. It's like, high wave.
Yeah.
So let's start with, Sue, what inspired you to write this book? Where did the idea come from? Where were we talking on this one?
Well, a couple of days after my mom passed away a few years ago at the age of 98, and both our moms were in their 90s when they passed within the same year, I was really overcome with the notion that I wasn't able to talk to her anymore. And it was so stunning and frustrating. And I said to Jim, I said, there's so many things I wish I could tell my mother. And that's really where the title was born. And he sort of said, ooh, that sounds good. And I really felt like right then it was kind of an aha moment, but there was so many emotions going on right around that time. So then he said, well, hey, let's see if we can, sort of make this work. And the idea of sort of going on a travel trip together, because I'd grown up with my parents that always taken me on trips. So I feel really lucky with that. And, the Norwegian heritage. And I also did the same with Jack when he was growing up. We always took great trips. And I think that was as a result of my upbringing. And then, of course, we had to go to Paris. So there was that.
We had to go to Paris. Did either of you, Susan, we'll go to you first. Did you have a relationship like this with your mom? Like, what was your relationship like with your mom?
It was very close, but she got on my nerves so many times. There were a lot of little things that it really just made me crazy. And I think one of the charms of writing the book is I could get that out on paper and kind of move on from it. I could create the love, but also not forget the mishigas, as it were, the craziness and the differences of opinion. And my mother was very judgmental and very opinionated. And most of the time she was on my side. And very often the opinions were against me or different from mine. So it was very cathartic to deal with it after she died. Things I didn't get to tell her or ask her.
Well, I've heard a lot of that too. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
From people that I've told about the book. In fact, just yesterday, a friend of mine, she had lost her husband and she had two teenage twins, girls. And then she recently lost her mom. And so she was really interested in this. And she said, sometimes there's one little thing that they say and it gets in your mind and it's not necessarily seems like a big thing, but it gets in there. And she said, so she could really relate to this, that she didn't want to, I don't want to say make them a mistake, but get into that with her daughters. And, then she also had the grief of her husband dying along the way. But I hear that from a lot of people, and it's sort of like, isn't that kind of our job as a mom? I mean, you want them to like your kids to like you, but on the other hand, you got to be the mother. So it's sort of a tough thing. And I always would tell Jack, hey, you weren't born with a set of instructions. So I mean, and then I agree with Susan. I mean, our relationships were different with our mothers, but, we were brought up in different situations, but I really think that there's, a deep love there, but the day-to-day stuff, the little stuff, and they know how to get you with, sort of regrets and feeling guilty and stuff like that. But underneath it all, I really love this because having accumulated all of my mom's things after this sort of happened, and then COVID came and the journey of going through a lot of her things, and old photos and everything. So that it was kind of a neat, I really loved the process, and now the feeling that now I can sort of chuckle about a lot of that stuff that would have driven me crazy before.
Yeah. As a friend of mine says, your mother knows how to push all your buttons because she's the one who put them there.
Yeah, right. That's so
Good
perfect.
line. Good line.
That is so
really
perfect.
is
I'm going to write
true.
that down.
That's a good one. That's a good one. My mom passed away over the summer as well at 93.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And my mom could do the same thing. Like, she could just give me a look and I'd be like withered, withered. But then here's what I really miss. And last time I saw Sue, we were at Morristown Festival of Books. I miss seeing her in the front row because she'd also be the person that they're there clapping for you every single step of the way and saying, that's my daughter. So there were the two sides of it. It was definitely the look. But the other night, my younger son came over and he has his hair really long and he's got a pull back in some ponytail thing. And he's got a beard. And I said, okay, before Easter, let's pick one. Either we've got to undo the ponytail or we've got to shave the beard. I pick one, just pick one thing, And he just looks at me like, again, we're having this conversation. I said, you'll look back and regret this, And I thought, oh my God, what am I saying?
I know. That's it. Well, that was what my dedication was. Because my mom always would say, you'll miss me when I'm gone.
That's exactly.
And actually I do. I mean, it really, I do miss her. I mean, I really loved my dad, but he's been gone longer. And so I don't know, that mother thing, I don't know. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, Susan said the same thing. Her dad was gone longer. So it's a different dynamic. It's a different dynamic. My dad's still alive. So I'm still trying to sort of move everything around, move the pieces around without my mom. So
right.
It goes on and on. So one of our readers said, I think the two main characters were perfectly crafted. I felt like I got to know them very different than they were from each other. How did you develop the characters and tell us a little bit about them? Like, did you actually draw, this is who's going to be what or what? So, Susan,
what do you think, Susan? They're kind of.
Why don't you go first, Sue? You go.
Well, I think that, this is fiction, but there are definitely some little truth sprinkles in there. For my mom was, and if she were able to see this book, she would love this, first of all, love it. But she would be a little like, I'm not really that Dr. Liz, am I? I mean, my mom did go to college and she was an econ major and a nursing major, and she became a professor of nursing. So, I mean, back then, I mean, if she was alive today, she'd be 102.
Right.
I mean, women really didn't go to college. And, she probably was born too soon. She probably would have been a doctor had she been born later, or a stockbroker or something like her dad. And then the whole idea of the beautiful clothes. And my mom, the little farm girl from Wisconsin who had, I mean, really like two incredible brothers and sisters, but she had these amazing clothes, these couture clothes. Where and why did she have them? I don't know, but I have them all now. They unfortunately don't fit, but it's kind of that. And then a little of the, I mean, Susan and I were both in advertising. I was a swimmer in college. So there was a little of that. Had to get the University of Wisconsin in there. I mean, I think they just did kind of evolve, right, Susan, out of our experiences.
bits and pieces of our mothers. My mother too
Yeah.
was a fashionista, and one of the things she was always critical of me of was that I wasn't. I was very comfortable in jeans or black shirts, still am. And the love was there, but it just was interesting. Any two people, especially mother and a daughter, are going to disagree on stuff. And the question is, how badly do they disagree? My mother who was a very lovely, pretty woman, could do a withering glance that would make me feel about that big. No words, just
Susan, you look really pretty today, by the way. You look really good.
My mother
I'm
would
not
be
kidding. You do.
Yeah, thank you, honey. My mother would be so glad to hear
Eyeshadow.
you say that. That was number one on her, 10 best list. But there are bits and pieces of a lot of people, and there's some real episodes. My mother was very judgmental and critical. She was a young mother. She was 22 when I was born. But then when I had kids, she was a fabulous grandmother because she was older and had wisdom. And I used to look at her and say, that's not the mother I had, who plays casino with M&Ms and teaches the kids how to play cards. My mother was saying, what are you wearing and where are you going? And you don't have enough eye makeup on, or you have too much on, or whatever. But she evolved and our story evolved, and we knew that the two mothers would be more judgmental. I'm sorry, the mother would be more judgmental, but we also knew there was love underneath that would come out when they spent more time together.
It's funny what you're saying about the clothes, because my father said the other day, where's your mother have all these clothes? She's got 4 closets of clothes. I saw her wear 2 pairs of pants. Where will all these clothes come from? It was really funny. He says, I was so excited. The cleaning lady came over. She's size 7. I said, here, take the shoes. So I was laughing so hard because it's like, I have no idea what to do with any of the fashion. No idea what to do.
Here's a funny factoid. My mother had an older brother and a younger brother, and she was the only girl in the family. And my grandfather's business was fashion. He was head of production at Frank Star Originals, which doesn't exist anymore. But just to put it in perspective, Pat Nixon wore a Frank Star Original to the inauguration. So my grandfather would come up on his lunch hour and bring my mother these ball gowns and these sequin things. And I thought to myself, where is she ever going to wear them? And the answer is very few places. She just liked them in the closet. It made her feel good. I don't have any of those.
I think lots of jeans. Back in that time, people entertain more in their homes. Well, I mean, I guess you can still find that, but I think they kind of dressed up more.
Yes, true.
They were sort of those, and then they'd have their little friends' balls that they go to, maybe locally, what I mean, like sort of an occasion where they could get dressed up. But I agree. I think that was something that obviously our mothers really made them feel good. And I mean, it is kind of fun to feel good about what you're wearing, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I worked at a fashion magazine. I mean, Blair, you definitely, I have to think about what I'm going to wear before I think about the speech. I can write the speech on the plane.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I'm out to the Hamptons next week. I was like, I got to do the interviews, but I got to throw the clothes out too. We'll figure that out. We'll figure that out. So I really, reader shared, I love the authors inserted humor into the book. The humor, the tension, the variety of emotions are all so true in the relationship. And I feel like you did a really good job of making these people feel, I feel like I know them. I feel like, oh, Liz, I feel like I should, well, I'm not going to say, but I feel like I feel like the things that I should be doing, I feel like I'd like to be getting together. Geez, your mother's not going to go on the trip. Why can't I go on a trip with you? Things like that. So how did you write, did you etch the story out first and then fill in the humor, or were you co-writing along the way going, I got a good line, let's do that one?
Well, we always have to have the outline, right, Susan?
Oh, yes. We spent almost as much time on the outline as we did on the book. And I must say, although I hate writing outlines, it is a wonderful thing to have. Yeah, definitely.
I think we drew from our experiences, and we got some of our own chuckles along the way.
Yes, right.
Shared pictures of things we found or whatever.
Yeah. I also think I love this formula that somebody once quoted to me: pain plus time equals humor. In other words, a lot of things that made me feel bad, criticism or whatever, you put it in perspective in the future or in the present, and it's funny. There's one thing in particular in the book that I added that actually happened. My mother, once I had kids, before kids, I would see her or call her, whatever. Once I had kids, she was there every weekend. And she'd walk in saying, what you should do with that? You should. And I said to her at one point, I'm very fortunate because so many of my friends have moms who've retired to Boca or Phoenix, and they have to wait months to find out what they're doing wrong. But I can find out every week. And she laughed and she realized it was true. And she tried very hard not to do that. Didn't always succeed, but things like that from our life. We put things in from our own life with our mothers.
Well, Susan, I don't know if you are aware, but she is the mother of triplets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And she has one other. I only have one, and he's sort of like a triplet because he was but like Susan said, he had a really wonderful relationship with my mom, minus a lot of the sores, that I had. And, I would say to him sometimes, don't kid yourself. That was not the same. She was different, but that was great. I'm glad that he had that. And she, was around for a long time. She saw him graduate from high school. So that was, I think she had in her mind, I got to make it to that.
Sure.
She would have lasted a little longer, but
yeah, no, that is great to having that extra layer of memories of your mom with your kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And your kids were a little older, so they were able to experience that for longer.
Right. Yeah, they were teenagers. Well, actually more. They were in their little ones were in their 20s when she died.
Yeah.
But
Are the triplets boys or girls or both?
2 boys and a girl.
Okay.
So I have 1 daughter and 3 boys. And
3 boys.
Older one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting though? My older son was going on a trip, and when my mother was in the hospital, and he says, "I'm going to go see her," and I was like, "Oh, great. No, it's really okay. You're not going to be away that long." And he went, and sure enough, she passed away while he was gone. And he says, if I didn't do that, what I would have felt, like that inner kind of a thing, is I never would have forgiven myself. So I was like, okay, I'm glad you did what you had. But I was like, we never saw that as something that was going to happen when he left. Never thought about it at all. So, but to get back to humor, one of our readers, and I want to know which one of you did this with your mom. One of my favorite parts was the episode in the restaurant when they were rating the men around them. Did you purposely interject the humor? Is this the way you two see life? So who sat with their mother and rated the men? We want to know. Either one of you? Come on.
I don't know. Did we? I don't
know. That was probably, a little of the fiction coming out, right?
That's a little of the girlfriend stuff.
Maybe that was a fantasy on our part that our moms would have ever done that. I mean, my mom was probably too, but I'll tell you what, there is that side. If we would have started doing it, that would have been really fascinating because to see, and that's kind of, I think what the book is about too, is to see if you do take it a little, you push the envelope a little with finding out another side about your mom or your daughter, that it could be sort of interesting. Because after my mom was gone too, and Susan is aware of this, I found a treasure trove of love letters that my mom and dad had written to each other. It really was pretty amazing to go through, but I also found some old boyfriend letters and this kind of stuff. I mean, this would have been really fascinating to get with my mom, some jewelry. And I had to figure out now where did that come from? Because my mom never wanted anybody to know her age.
Okay.
She was a few years older than my dad, and that was horrifying to her. She had several marriage proposals, and my dad somehow or other was the one who was able to cash in on that. I mean, I one of my uncle's good friends was one of the marriage proposals, and she turned him down. And I remember my uncle saying, apparently this guy that my mom decided not to marry, said, well, just remember, someday you'll think back and realize that you could have had me on a silver platter. And even my uncle said, I would have taken the platter. But I did meet this guy later. And I think it was at my aunt's funeral. And I was like, Mom, really? I mean, this guy, and not that, I mean, back in the day is probably, but I'm thinking to myself too, I mean, I wouldn't have been here if she was my dad, but it was really interesting to see. And then the fibbing about her age. I had found her class ring And she's like, well, no, that's not mine. And I was like, well, Mom, I was saying the year because she didn't want me to do the math, figure out her age. And it's like, but it has your initials on the inside. That was how she was until she was 98. Then
Funny.
she would say, but I'm 98. You know, her whole life, she never wanted to say her age.
But then it also, at my mom's wake, actually the couple that introduced them were there. And my father, they remember 70 years ago, my father's walking down the street and he goes, hey, who's that girl walking with your girlfriend over there? And he goes, I want to meet that girl. So they were at the wake, and I was just sitting there like, well, if they didn't introduce, say she says, I don't want her to meet him, I wouldn't be here. So it's like, yeah, there are those little stories. There are the little family heritage things.
Sure.
So was one character easier to write than the other, Susan? Was one easier or was one harder?
That's a good question. I think probably Liz was easier. I'm sorry, not Liz. Laurie was easier because she was closer to us. Right. You know, we were more the Laurie one, and Liz was our mothers up on pedestals. But we knew enough and we felt enough to be able to craft Liz the way, not that necessarily the way that our mothers were, but with qualities that we knew would kind of, how can I put this, work with Liz as you know, yin and yang or Sturm and Drang or whatever. So I think Liz is, Laurie's closer to us, and Laurie was more of a stretch. No, sorry. Laurie is closer to us and Liz was more of a stretch, but we had a lot to base it on.
Yeah.
But we also we also wanted to not, I mean, we didn't want to think of Laurie as being a you know, a less interesting, shall we say, character.
Right.
You know, because Liz was sort of interesting in that she was this, you know, I mean, she was sort of, I don't know, seemed like it to me anyway, but
yeah,
I think they're both really fascinating in their own little dynamics. So.
Yeah, and part of it was the intrigue of how do you feel when your mother is not just judgmental and not as giving as you want, but world renowned.
Right.
I mean, that's a biggie also. That gave us a lot of stuff to play with, that people knew her and knew of her and knew her expertise and were comforted by her in a way that her daughter wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I loved at the beginning of the book too, because the book really opens. We've got, for those listening to the podcast, you'll hear the audio excerpt at the end, is at the beginning of the book. Laurie is the one that's trying to get this big Atlantic account. Laurie's the one with all this pressure on herself, and she's up against these young people, and she really knows what she wants to do with this line. And you so captured advertising, you so captured what it's like in that world, because it's the new, fresh idea. It's not, anybody over a certain age doesn't know what they're doing. Anybody under a certain age, people, they do think. And I thought it was so good because she was in there doing her best at that point to win that account. And then you learn about her mother, but you first are seeing her in this, like, you know, job atmosphere, trying to win her job. And you sort of see like they're both vying for things in their own way. Am I right on that one? It's a good start off for her too?
Sure. And also what it shows in the first few pages, if I'm remembering it correctly, is her mother doesn't think much of advertising. Yes. Her mother thinks medicine is important. And there's that one part where Laurie is about to say, I can't come right now. I'm going into a meeting. And she almost says, I'm going into an important meeting, but she knows her mother will say medicine is important, advertising is not. So even though she's doing well in her sphere of influence, it's not, it's like one of those Venn diagrams where that's Laurie in the middle and her mother is the other big circles.
Right. And as the mother wanted her to
Venn diagrams.
The mother.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I was just going to say reiterate that what you said, the mother expected her to drop everything because there couldn't possibly be anything that she was doing that was more important.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. So what was the biggest challenge as you're writing this? What was the biggest challenge? Was it, you had the outline up front, writing the outline, I think it was somewhat of a challenge to try and make sure the story was going to go in the right place. Then as you were writing, were there times where you wrote yourself into a wall, or what are we going to do with this character? Or was it?
I thought we had fun all the time, didn't
we? We did. And I got to say one more thing. I really didn't know Sue before this book. I'd met her once or twice, and then we started talking, And my husband and I said, we should go to Norway. We've never been there, and the book's going to be there. And then Sue joined me. My husband just came for a few days. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm going on a trip with somebody I don't know. And we got to write a book together. And it could go either way. It could be, oh my God, why did we agree to this? And fabulous. And, I thought of it initially as this is like a 10-day blind date. But seriously, but we had the best time.
We really
We
did.
were like, from day one, we just
We did. We were
and
kind
had
of the
fun
yin and
and
yanging all the
gave
time.
each other ideas. And hey, you see this scene, that should be a scene. You see these people on the train knitting, that should be a scene.
And
it's
speaking of
great.
the knitting, I
And there's
have
the sweater.
right here
Your Norwegian sweater.
my Norwegian sweater. That is a true story in this fiction book. This is
Right.
Crystal Ripple did really knit this sweater.
See?
Yes.
See?
And that was inspired by the knitters on the train.
Right?
Yeah.
And being there.
Lady.
Yeah.
So
and being
cute.
there.
I mean, the Norwegians really do have that pastime still. It's kind of cool.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
And Sue had been in Norway several times before, so she was able to sort of steer the trip, steer the here's where we should go, here's where we don't have to. It was just great.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. Well,
I helped Susan get her duffel bag in the overhead bin.
That's right. She's
I was going to ask,
taller than I am, or something like that.
who had which luggage? Who was Liz and who was Laurie on the luggage?
I had the crappy luggage.
Yeah, mine's okay. It definitely would never go to the Louis Vuitton route. That stuff's touching the ground. It's not worth it. But I know some people love it. But that was all part of the,
It's part of the show.
Part of the fiction, part of the show.
Yeah. So one of our readers shared, I love following along on the vacation. I found myself Googling some of the places they visited in Paris. The story flowed nicely and I enjoyed the back and forth chatter between the mother and daughter. Did you get to travel to do research or was this from memory? So the part in Norway you did travel together, had you both been to Paris before to know Paris?
Yeah.
Yes. I'd spent several weeks there at 2 different times, and I used to go there starting from my 20s. And a couple of things that we put in actually happened, like the Cartier exhibit at the Louvre. I saw that several years ago, and it was mind-boggling. It was like fish hanging from nets, and they had the Duchess of Windsor's panther brooch on a green thing. It looked like green velvet. It looked like the jungle. It was just beautiful. I figured we had to get that in.
Yeah. We had, I've been to Paris a lot of times too. And that was one of the things with Jack when I would take him every summer on a trip. And we decided that we either always had to start or always end in Paris, just because we had to go to Paris. We just loved it so much. And, it's almost like you can continue to go back to the same things every time and just, it's just really so beautiful and, around every corner, something really special. And so I would never get tired of going there.
So did you go before like lockdown or after? Like when was the Norway trip?
Right before lockdown. It was
right
2019, November 2019. And then in March was lockdown. So the timing was great.
Time was great to just go write. We could just sit there and write because there's not much of things we can do.
Yeah, that was what was so perfect about the timing in that sense. Yeah. And we saw the Northern Lights and everything else. It was really, really fun. I look back fondly on that.
It was a wonderful trip.
Yeah.
Another reader shared the travelogue design of the majority of the book actually brought back memories of my own mother. We traveled to Paris and Oslo and other European cities together in 2001. We too visited the Viking Museum and the Olympic ski area, as well as Paris sites. While our relationship was much closer and less confrontational than that of Laurie and Dr. Liz, I found some similarities as my mother could be all-knowing sometimes. However, she became more amenable after getting lost in Amsterdam when she did not heed my suggestions to stay put on a bench and wait until I returned from down the block. Scared me so much when I could not find her at first. So no, you really struck home with people. And I'm betting it's going to spark a lot of memories for people of, remember when my mother did that and I told her not to? So was it doing the same with you too? Of like, I remember when I said, don't do that,
I've had a lot of people say to me too, that they want to now take a trip with their mom. One friend said her mother is Norwegian. She said she's going to plan a trip to Norway. And And, some people are like, I really have wanted to do this, but then I'm like, a little doubt, like what Laurie says in the book, she was so happy at first that she kind of blurted out, that her mother was, maybe feeling better, that she blurted out, how about if we go on a trip together? And then immediately thought to herself, what am I doing? So I think some people may have avoided it for that reason, but I have had several people say that to me. So it's sort of interesting, and that would be great. That would be great. And for mothers and daughters to read it together, share it together, would be wonderful as well.
A reader said, I think this is a book will be a boon for Parisian tourism, as well as responsible for mother-daughter travel excursions. So you two could actually start a service where mothers and daughters can go, tell us your likes, tell us how you don't get along, and our service will provide what you should do on that trip and not do, and where you should go out alone and not with your mom. So there you go. There you go.
It'd be great if they'd report back after.
Yeah.
Report back on what we're doing. So without giving anything away, I'm going to share this from a reader. I think of any mother and daughter would relate to this. There's a twist. It's a curveball that hit me hard. And of course, that's where the real lesson is. And we're not going to give anything away. Maybe the important thing I learned from you is people don't always give you what they want. They give you what they have to give. I think that's a really good line.
That is a good line.
The last line of the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I don't mean it's true. It's less. It is true. You can only get so much.
And she said, I'm going to give this book to my 91-year-old mother to read. And another said, my daughter and I have taken several trips outside the US. So I was curious about this book. We get along better than these two. We have lots of fun and giggles. And the ending was a surprise. And now I'm going to pass it on to my daughter to get her take on it. And many of the readers said, I'm passing it along. They immediately knew of all the readers we heard from, and it was dozens, that they would suggest people read it. Were you thinking about the audience? What were you thinking about the audience as you wrote? Because, you're writing for yourselves at the same time, but you're writing for a larger audience. And did you have any goals that you were seeing as you were writing the book, or I just hope they have fun reading it?
I think mothers and daughters the relationship can be so fraught. There's, mothers, I'm not going to be sexist to say that women are more emotional, but I don't think fathers and sons have quite the same issues, let's say, as mothers and daughters. I think raising my daughter was harder for me than raising the three boys. They were almost like wash and wear kids, give them a bath, send them out. And she was very different and didn't like the clothes I wanted her to wear and didn't like the way I wanted her to do her hair. So I think there are all kinds of things like that. I wasn't particularly thinking of the audience. I don't know if you were, Sue, but
no,
I was thinking, how do we create these two real characters? What are the kinds of things they would go through that would be universal, that would resonate? And they were things that we had gone through with our own mothers that resonated for us.
And I think what you said at the beginning about sort of thinking through all these things after our mothers had passed away, it sort of, probably helped us too. It was a nice way of reflecting in a sense. And I, like you said, now we can sort of chuckle about it in ways maybe we wouldn't have before. Funny things that, you think about, but
no, you laugh now. Before you would have called up your girlfriend and gone, do you know what just happened? You're not going to believe this. If you told your husband, he'd be like, it's a big deal. But your girlfriend would go, oh no, you're kidding. Really? That happened? Like, you're gotta be kidding. Exactly. And you need somebody, and it's not usually your sister. It's got to be one of your girlfriends, because it's got to be somebody outside the sphere of family. It's got to be somebody that's going to totally be on your side. Because your sister might go, she was right. She was right. You did that. That's like ridiculous. Now you got to go outside the sphere.
Yeah.
So another piece of praise from a reader is I'm an avid reader, multiple books a week, and it's been quite some time since I read a book that I truly wanted to pass on. It's pretty cool. The storyline, plot, and writing were so good. The ending was unexpected, which I appreciated. It's so increasingly rare in fiction these days for me not to guess the ending entirely too early in the story. When it happens, I have trouble enjoying the plot, which was not the case in this book. Without giving anything away, you have this outline at the beginning. Did you always know how the story was going to end? Did you always know how it was going to wrap? And was that writing that part of the outline then a lot of oomph for you? We can't give anything away.
I think we did. We wrote it 4 years ago. We started it 4 years ago.
Wow.
I don't remember precisely, but it just sort of evolved. Sue, what do you remember?
Yeah, I think that's about it too. I mean, it's hard for me to tell people about the book because what I can tell them,
Yeah.
it's almost one of those things. It's like, I think all the little nuances, it's hard to sort of sum that up. So it's perfect. Actually, now that you're reading those, those reviews you got, because I just think it's hard to sort of put it into a nugget, but I do feel that a lot of people could relate to it. It may not be their experience, but there's something in there that they're going to be able to relate to, and passing it along is great. And I hope that when you say that, you mean they're going to go to a bookstore and buy another one.
It's going to be a gift. It's going to be a gift.
It's going to be a gift, and it is a great gift to be, completely shameless.
Right.
I do think it's a nice gift to share.
It is. Yeah, that's true.
Perfectly timed for Mother's Day, like just
Yeah.
just
Sure.
throwing that out. I mean, there's a reason it's coming out in April, people, and not November. Okay, like there's a
That's true.
reason for this, everyone. Like, I hope that you're like, getting that along.
Yeah.
In case our audience doesn't know, Sue Patterson, yes, is related to James Patterson, and this book was written with him. So, how did Jim get involved? What was his role? Was it working on the outline? Where was he?
Well, he was really good. He wants you to know about delivering coffee and donuts. Oh, no, he was so supportive. I love it just from the beginning that the idea sparked to him. And he really loved my mom, which is also, I'm not making it up. He really did. I shouldn't say this, but he probably, cared. He had a much closer relationship, I'd say, with my mom than his own.
Right.
My mom had a room in our house. She was here every weekend. He loved having her. I mean, I think he believed all the little things. He could see how there were those sometimes little things, but he was free of any of that. I think he knew Jim is sort of off limits. But no, that was really wonderful, and I think he's. So he was really supportive of the idea, and he's known Susan better than I knew Susan, and I knew Susan's husband better than I knew Susan, but
That's true.
I knew I liked Susan.
Oh, you're so sweet. And I like you.
She was easy to like.
I was afraid I wouldn't, but I really did. Jim is also a master at plotting things out. So when we were working on the outline, he could just look at the paragraphs and say, this is great, but then you should have a scene where such and such happens, or you don't need this scene. You could cover that in that scene, or no, we have to go back and fit. He was just, it's a jigsaw puzzle, and he was wonderful at planning it and plotting it and commenting on it. He's really excellent at that. He has this editorial sense that's very helpful and very great. And then as we were writing, he would then comment on the writing. And so he was like, what would you say? Editor, planner, producer, dramaturg.
I would say she's spot on with that. I mean, even just in the little things that we've been doing together with social media, little stuff, even he's like a master at it.
Right.
I mean, I've been around this all the time I've known him for 40 years.
Right.
Been married to him for 25, but now that I'm actually involved, and I do help him out with a lot of little stuff he does extra, but I really do get he really is, it's amazing, but his advertising background, and he's a brilliant marketer, and I think the story really touched him too. So he was all in,
Well, he saw what you were going through and how you felt. And it's like, wait a second, there's times you can write yourself way through things, and you can write yourself out of something the way you're feeling a lot better than just trying to do it yourself. And if you just put the words down on paper and you move things around, you're like, that was my mother. Okay, now I got it. But then let's do something funny and sort of get some levity going as well. And for the reader, we don't want to just be stuck on my mother saying I didn't dress well. Let's go to something else.
No, I think we made a great team.
Yeah.
And it was really a joy. I loved it.
It was fun. Also, I might add, since we both have an advertising background, our writing isn't stuffy. Our writing is meant for consumers and to get people to feel a certain way and think a certain way and to touch nerves within them. So I'm glad that we have that background, because it made our prose more accessible.
Yeah.
And
there's a
tighter
lot of-
and tighter, because you're going to say,
Right, right,
yes.
the headline thing.
Yeah, or 30-second
Yeah,
commercials.
or a
Yeah,
snapshot
right.
of whatever, you know.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, how do you get the 60 second to the 30 to the 15?
Yeah,
And sometimes you'll see the same commercial, long, medium, short. And it's like,
Yes.
just to get the short at some point, because you already saw the bigger. And
Right.
what you did with this book is we saw them like more in depth up here. And then you could just get the line. Like you could figure out who was going to feed which line back and forth,
Mhm.
because we had our airplane view of them, you know?
Yeah, right.
A reader shared, I commend you writing a novel that comes across as a memoir. And they said, how did you do it with the two people writing? So you had this large outline. And were you in the same room writing? Were you writing online, sharing
So
like?
we just, well, yeah, there was also
Yeah.
COVID in there. We talked a lot on the phone.
We talked a lot. It was back
Yeah.
and forth, back and forth.
Yeah,
And no, we weren't even in the same city. So,
email. Yeah.
but because of Zoom and telephones and stuff like that and emails, it was back and forth, back and forth. And there's a great line that a woman in advertising once said, collaboration is when you have an idea and then somebody else comes along and turns it into an idea and a half. And I really think, you know, the whole is definitely from my end, the whole is definitely more the sum of its, more than the sum of its parts. And it was, you know, the collaboration, the back and forth that created that.
Mm-hmm.
If I was in the room by myself, it wouldn't have been the same.
And you know, people are always asked this question because Jim gets it all the time. But when you think about it, there's so many things in the world that are collaborated.
Right.
And if you turn on the TV, there's collaboration. You read the newspaper, there's collaboration. I mean, music, you know, go to Broadway, that's collaboration. I mean, it's not just one person, you know, so many. So I don't know why all of a sudden with writing, you know, just, I think it offers up, you know, a much bigger idea, like you said.
Well, you know, years ago, there was an ad that ran in the New York Times for an author who will remain unnamed. And it was a full page ad. And I just sat there and I called the marketing person. I said, this is really not a good ad for this book. Like, look at what you're saying, da, 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 da. And he goes, you know, I'm going to bring that up in the marketing meeting today. So publisher walked in and goes, isn't this the best ad we ever did? And then nobody said a word. So I learned from that. That was years, a couple of decades ago. And this is what I always say to my staff, is this a good idea or a bad idea? I'm going to tell you up front and tell me if it's a bad idea. So you actually welcome getting that kind of criticism, because a lot of times people just want to hear it's perfect and it's not. And if you can take it and say, how can I make this better? Like, here, Jim, take this. What do you think we could do? How do we speed it up? What do we do? And you have to be amenable to taking that kind of feedback.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you've ever been in advertising, you need to be able to take a couple of
You have to,
Yeah.
I used to have a sign in my room. It was a quote by Mark Van Doren, who is a professor of English literature at Columbia University many, many years ago. And I just love the quote. He said, bring ideas in and entertain them royally, for one of them may be the king.
Oh,
And it's
I like
great
that.
because if you're writing something and somebody adds to it or creates something, you can put it in and then you get the credit for it.
Right.
You know, it's a very selfish kind of way to think. But I always thought, that's right. You never know where an idea or a thought or whatever is going to come from. So I love working with other people. It's very important.
Yeah. And it's getting different ideas to come together. It's really, you know, building, it could build on an idea if you're both receptive and there's no ego at the table. What I find is that
Absolutely.
ego at the table, but if not, let's play with this.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. More the merrier, for sure.
Here's something else from a reader. I definitely recommending the book to my reader friends, and I hope to use it for book club choice in the future, as I know it will lend itself to much discussion. Most of my book club members are ladies whose mothers are no longer living, and I know they can relate to Laurie and Liz. And another said, I plan to recommend it to my book clubs. I believe it's something that will lead to deep discussions about our first and longest relationship. So my question for you is, do you have book club discussion questions for this book? Like, is there a guide for this book, or have you thought about pulling one together? Because a lot of times groups are looking for questions to get them started.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Collaboration. There it is.
Right. See, same voice.
That is a good idea.
Terrific. Yeah, we should.
I see it on social media.
Yeah,
But yeah, that is a thought. I mean, somebody else I was talking to in a group, and I said, you know, I'll bet you right now, without even thinking, if we were all, told to come down, write down the first 5 things you think of when you think of your mother. It's a no-brainer. I mean, and right there you would have, if you then said, put those forward and you went around the table, I mean, it would make for an interesting conversation.
Right.
It would be easy.
And to sit
there
and
are a
relate,
million ways to go with it, but it's a good idea to sort of put that thought out there.
a good thought out there, and like, here are the questions that we would bring up. Like, what did you think of Liz? What did you think of her mother? And different people might have different opinions. Like people of a certain age might sit there and go, Liz, ooh, she's, spot on. That's who I wish I was, whatever. But I really think that when we hear that kind of a thing buzz up, like we gave this book to like 40, 50 people. If we hear back from 40 people and that's what's coming out of the conversation, that's a lot of conversation. That's a lot of saying. And in this interview, I'm trying to put as many of their comments as I can, but believe me, there are even more. And it was really one of those things where it was everything I read through last night was, this is a really good book. And that's hard, because a lot of times you don't get that. You get somebody like, I didn't finish, or, I didn't get any of that. So we'll get those to you as well.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to have those. Susan and I both.
Yeah, because just to see, like, what people are actually saying, what the feedback is. A reader said that the very title shows regret. And I share that regret. In addition to wishing for more time with my mom, was things I wish I told my mother always the title? Was that always going in?
Well, that was the first thing that came to mind when I had that notion. And it wasn't, and if you asked me, what was it that you wished you would have told her at that moment? I don't know, because I think it was just some random thing. I mean, at the end of her life, I mean, she lived nearby. So I made a point, especially every day I would go over and see her, and I'd be like, Mom, how about a hot fudge sundae, or you want to make coffee? I mean, I just tried to make it. And no matter how long I stayed, I was like, you're going home.
Yeah, right.
It was those little things. Yeah, totally. And then it was like, I'd stick around for another half an hour and it was the same response.
Sure.
Unbelievable. But well, do I have regret? I don't. I mean, you would always be able to come up with something, I think.
Right.
I think there's probably a normal thing, but when I think of the last night she was alive, Jim and Jack and I were all with her, and she was really sharp. I think her body just gave out, but we had called some relatives and everything else. And I went back after dinner to see her again. I don't know why. It was late at night, and I was going to go there again the next day. And when I think about it in hindsight, like I kissed her goodbye on the cheek, and then I left, and I thought to myself, you know what, I didn't turn around and look at her again before I left, but I didn't know, because the next day I was ready to go over there in the morning, because and usually I'd see her later in the day, but I had planned on going in the morning. And as I was walking out the door, I looked out and I saw, it just was a beautiful, I take a lot of pictures in the morning, and this beautiful image. And I don't know why I even felt like I should take this picture. But as I walked away from taking that picture, the phone rang, and it was her doctor. And he said, she's gone. She just passed away. And he's like, 2 minutes before she was talking.
Wow.
And I was like so stunned. And the point about the picture was, when I looked, the timestamp was the time, her official time of passing.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was just so weird. But so you never know. I mean, like I knew she was sort of at the end, but I didn't know that
day. That day is it.
I was never going to see her again.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then you could think of things like, if you had one more moment to be with your mom, or a day, what would you do?
Yeah. What's one more thing you would have said?
Yeah. And my mom, after her stroke, after her stroke, was in and out of dementia. So there was a time where I couldn't tell her things. I wanted to, but it wouldn't resonate. She wouldn't get it. She wouldn't understand it. She wouldn't remember it. And then after she died, I think we've all experienced this. Something happens. You say, oh God, I can't wait to tell my mother. Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that moment where you reach for the phone to tell her a piece of news, or somebody you know died, somebody she knew died. And there's always that sense of loss. And if only she had lasted longer, if only she'd been more cognizant. So there's, you know, it's always a goodbye, no matter what. Some longer than others.
Yeah, some longer than others is right.
Mm.
Yeah, this book has a tagline that I think is a Jim tagline. Let me see if I'm right. The most emotional mother-daughter novel in years.
No, I don't know.
I didn't write it.
I don't,
but I
that could
agree
have
with
been
it.
Little Brown. I don't know.
Okay, I saw that someplace. I was like, is that Jim? The most emotional. Da, 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 da. Okay, the cover. I have my arc. Did you like? Was this the first shot? Oh, there you
The
go.
real one.
Was
This
this?
is much prettier than the arc.
It is. It is.
It is really a beautiful cover, and
Now,
it has this nice little pink on the inside, which I love too.
Was this the first cover you saw, or did you play around with covers, or was this like
We
you got
had
it?
there were several swings at it, and we settled on this. I you know, it started off in a different place, and I can't really get into it because I might give too many things away.
Right.
But I love where it came out.
Right.
And I feel like the sort of handwriting that was always there.
Right. Okay.
And you know, it's just different, and I think it really pops. I love the color combinations and you know, the little nod to Paris in there.
We're blue today to work with the jacket.
I know. I've been trying to. Sorry, I got my Norwegian red on, but yes, I've been trying to think of. Oh, I should wear blue. I don't know if a lot of people will pick up on that, but I like your thinking.
Well, it's funny because I went in the closet and there was a different sweater. I'm like, where's the one that's really that color blue? But
Yeah.
like, hey, we went for a little contrast.
The
today.
real cover is rich. I mean, the colors are really, you know, rich. I was never a fan of that arc, but I was a little, but when I opened the box and saw this, I was very happy with it.
Oh, this is like good. This is good.
Yeah.
You know, a reader said you both described your mothers, but not from what you got from the happy relationships to the one in the book. Like, did you think that your mothers had secrets too? Like, well, you know, your mother had secrets. You know that she could have married somebody else and you might not have been here. You know?
Yeah.
Did your mother have secrets from you too? You know?
Yes, she did. And I knew some of them because her friends told me after she died. And I knew some of them because she told me. But yeah, we all have secrets. Had I traveled with her, maybe she would have told me everything.
Right. Right.
But
well,
yeah.
When my mom passed away, what I didn't realize is how much she'd done for other people. Every single person came up to me and was saying, your mother made me this when my daughter was sick. Your mother did this, your mother did that. And it actually gave me the idea for the eulogy, which I actually went up and said, everybody, I want you to go out and do something for somebody else today. Go out and be like Sylvia, like go do one thing today. And it was like, but I did not know all her friends, her lunch brunch, the book club, the sewing club, like the knitting group. I didn't know all these people, but it's sort of like when you put all your parents' friends in a room and you hear about your parents, you see like this different story of your mom. Then I knew she was giving, don't get me wrong, but I didn't know she'd done it for this and that and the other thing. So
and they knew a different side of her. They knew her as a friend.
Right.
Very different. Yeah.
Kind of our notion about, you know, trying to, once you get past, I guess, a certain age where, I mean, I guess when you're always going to be a mother, and, you know, probably you're always going to want to call your mother if you have a tummy ache or whatever, you know, for advice but, you know, to actually know her and then as a mother, not worry so much about, you know, the job of being a mother or the whatever you want to call it. You know, what you feel that you have to be as a mother. You can maybe get to know your child or your mother in a more as a friend.
More as a friend. Right. And just say, okay, like, what are these things that I want to take away? I know like years ago, their book came out, Everything You Want to Know About Sex or something like that. And I was like, my parents do that? Like, really?
Well, don't buy this book for that.
But it's really funny though, where Dr. Liz is out and she's like, is my mother not going to come home? Like, where's my mother? Like, what is my mother doing? Like, oh my gosh, I couldn't think of my mother doing that. No, that's for young people like me, you know? It was really amusing. It was really, really amusing. So you had the ending in mind when you began writing. And somebody said, I'm glad with the ending, but I'm glad there was chapter 66. So nobody read ahead. You can't read the end of the book ahead. You don't go ahead.
So I don't even know what chapter 66 is. I'll have to cheat.
Cheat. It was good. It was good. So at times they said I could identify the two different voices in the book
Right.
perfectly in the dialogue. Was this the two of you splitting up the dialogue, or did you get into the characters' heads and go, she'd do this, she'd do that, and kind of riff back and forth with each other?
We didn't split up the dialogue, but we talked about what the attitudes would be.
Mhm.
And that
That's
lent itself to the actual dialogue.
Mhm.
But we had a very clear picture of who the characters were. I think that's really at the heart of it. We
Yes.
knew who Dr. Liz was, what was important to her, what she looked like, what she told people, what she wanted people to think of her. And Laurie was more down to earth. We knew she had issues with her own, confidence and whatever.
Mhm.
So once we got a clear picture of the characters, it was much easier to figure out what they would and would not say, and their language, their styles of talking. In fact,
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Well, everybody wants to know if you thought about doing another book together.
we
Why
haven't
not?
talked about it,
Where
but
can we go next, Susan?
yeah.
Let's figure that out first. We might have a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
People are really asking about it. I mean, that was
I've had so many people ask me that.
They said, are you going to continue Laurie's story? What's next for you? I've got a lot
I've
of that.
even had people suggest things.
See? Yeah. That's even good. That's even good.
Later.
Call me later. We'll talk more. You know? The audio is narrated by Ellen Archer. And did you pick her as the narrator? Did you know that's who you wanted to be?
I did pick her. She had done, I should say we picked her. She had done Jim's House of Wolves book.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought she was really spectacular on that. There were a couple other choices and they were all kind of good, but I think in the end she was really good. And that's what somebody said to me. Did you read the audio book? I was like, oh. Jim did read his autobiography, and I have a picture of him in the soundproof booth going, let me out. I would not be. Susan has a nice voice. You do, and Susan laughs literally at everything. That's what makes her so fun. She's just
thanks.
Even if she doesn't think it's funny, I think she chuckles. It's really good.
But it's like doing the audiobook, you don't realize that you lisp, you don't realize that you swallow.
No, I don't like the way I sound. I never want to listen to myself.
Generally, when I talk, nobody can hear me. My husband says everybody does this when I talk.
Oh, really?
They lean
in.
So I don't think I'd be a good one to narrate.
Maybe that's because of what you're saying. They're leaning in. See, he's thinking.
That would be nice to think.
What you have to hear. You know what I mean? Okay, so I'm going to close on this note. Well, you do need to do another book. I just want you to know the vote is in. You need to do another book.
What we can do is wait. Let me videotape you saying this, and I can tell Jim.
You need to do another book together. Tell me, you need to do another book together. This is terrific, and all our readers are asking for. What are they going to do next? We got a lot of questions about that. What's next?
Thank you, readers. I'm not kidding. I am shameless. I'm
shameless. So I'm going to close on this note from a reader. This book will be remembered long after the last pages are read and the book cover is closed. The lesson about life, about things you said and about things not said. It's about giving your all, whatever that might be, and to the extent that you can give it. I think that's a beautiful line.
That's lovely.
That is so perfect.
Yeah, I wish I wrote it.
I know.
What we'll do is we'll go back and the blurbs on the book we can do from Bookreporter readers. How's that? We can just do all the blurbs.
I would love it.
You love that?
I'd love it. Thank you so much. This has been really fun too.
Wonderful. Thank you
so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time.
I had a great time and I appreciate it too. And thank you for all the good reviews and everything else.
We'll make sure we get everything packaged up and sent to you. And then any day that you're sitting there going, I don't know if we can, just go pull out this whole stash. Yes, we can do this again. No problem. And to our readers, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks to. Remember, you can find us online. We're on the Book Report Network on YouTube or Book Reporter Talks to wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Great.
you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thanks,
This
Susan.
is so much fun.